This is the AORUS 16X from Gigabyte, a 16-inch laptop featuring an Intel Core i7-14650HX CPU, an RTX 4070 laptop GPU, and a QHD 165Hz display. It's an awesome looking machine, and this has been my daily driver for the last couple of weeks, whilst my personal gaming PC has just been sitting on the floor in the corner of this room as I deliberate what upgrades I want to make for that thing. This machine has been more than adequate for gaming, script writing, and just relaxing watching some YouTube videos, though for £1,400, it should be able to handle some YouTube videos and some old school RuneScape on the side. There is actually a couple variations available of the AORUS 16X. Some feature an i9 CPU, an RTX 4060 instead of a 4070 laptop GPU, and some include 32 or 16 gigabytes of RAM. Depending on where you live and your region, that will determine what models are available to you and what you can go out and buy right now. But a good thing to note is that the RAM and SSD are both upgradable if you want to do it yourself down the line, and it can actually save you a little bit of money. There's also a spare SSD slot for even easier storage upgrades. If I'm honest, the laptop's design is one of the most standout parts of this machine, and AORUS has done an excellent job. The color is a kind of blue navy color, and depending on the light, it can look kind of gray at the right angle. Most of the device is plastic, but the top is an aluminium alloy, which can be cold to the touch and also be a bit of a fingerprint magnet. Around the perimeter of the laptop, we have large exhausts on each side and also at the rear. Another thing at the rear, we have that RGB AORUS projector logo that shines down onto the desk. And it just kind of reminds me of some car doors that when you open them up, they project the logo down onto the floor. I just get that kind of vibes from this sort of thing. Except this is on the back of the laptop, and the only person who's really gonna see it is the person sitting opposite you in class or at work. So, you know, make of it what you will. Of course, you can just disable it within the software if you want to keep some credibility when you're just out and about. Looking around the sides of the laptop, we do have plenty of I/O. On the left-hand side, we have the DC barrel jack for the included 240 watt power adapter, a HDMI 2.1, an Ethernet jack, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A port, one USB Type C with Thunderbolt 4 and DisplayPort 1.4 capability, and also power delivery up to 100 watts. On the right hand side, we've got another Type A 3.2 Gen 2 port, a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 port that is DisplayPort capable. However, there is no Thunderbolt or power delivery on this right hand side, so just remember that. We also have a micro SD card slot and a combined headphone and microphone jack. Personally, I always prefer a full-size SD slot over a micro SD slot, as you can fit both SD card sizes in a bigger slot, not the other way around. The display on the AORUS 16X can be lifted with just a single finger, revealing the fully backlit RGB keyboard, a large touchpad, and more ventilation for the internals. Though it may look like the sides have grills for speakers, the speakers are in fact on the bottom of the device, and they fire downwards. As a result, depending on the surface you sit this thing on, it can have a drastic effect on how the speakers sound. They sound fine on a desk and get pretty loud, but sitting on your bed or on your lap, it sounds a lot more muffled and a lot worse. The keyboard feels really good to type on, and I got comfortable using it to write this script for this video within about 10 minutes or so. I'm not the biggest fan of the gaming letters being different from the rest of the keyboard, as I'd prefer a more kind of uniform approach overall. The touchpad, on the other hand, is excellent though. It's large and easy to use for gestures within Windows, and the palm rejection works really well, so you don't have to worry about your hands kind of moving the mouse around as you type. But moving things up just a little bit, we can finally get a better look at the included display with the AORUS 16X. It's a 2560 by 1600 16 by 10 IPS panel that supports G-Sync and 165 Hz. In SDR mode, I measured the peak brightness on this display at 609 nits, making this thing extremely usable in bright rooms and even outside if needed. With this thing, you won't get OLED or mini LED levels of color accuracy. Maybe out of the box, I would recommend that you color calibrate this thing, as the colors seem a little bit flat, and you can instantly see the difference between the reds between the color calibrated version and the factory version. Above the display is the integrated 1080p webcam, which includes Windows Hello support. However, I have found it incredibly inconsistent and just slow for Windows Hello facial recognition. And 9 times out of 10, it probably would have just been quicker for me to just type in a PIN code or use a fingerprint reader if it had one. If you are wondering about the quality of the webcam and microphone, well, I'll let you be the judge. So this is just a quick test of the built-in webcam on the AORUS 16X. Like, quality-wise, not too bad. It's pretty quick. It doesn't have like autofocus or anything. It's just a fixed focal rate. That's fine. When it comes to lighting though, I did try this a minute ago with my softbox on me and it just didn't work. half of the side of the image was completely dark, the other half was completely lit, and now I've turned on like the ceiling lights and the whole room is lit. It just looks a little bit better. So low light performance, terrible. Audio quality or microphone quality, also pretty terrible, because after a while you just start hearing fan noise. After this thing starts to get a little bit hot, it just seems to drown out the sound of the microphone. Just use your headset microphone, it'll be 1,000 times better than what this is. Now, let's discuss the most essential part of any gaming laptop. What is it like for gaming, and what are its limitations? But before we do that, I'll run through the entire spec list of this model I'm using right here. We've got the i7 14650HX for the CPU with 16 cores and 24 threads, and a maximum boost clock of 5.2 GHz, a 1TB NVMe Gen 4 SSD, a 140 watt RTX 4070 laptop GPU, and 16 GB of 5600 MHz DDR5 memory. Now let's talk about limitations. The two biggest ones out of the box are the 16 GB of RAM and the 8 GB of VRAM on the RTX 4070 laptop GPU. 16 GB of system memory is acceptable for most titles, but as you can quickly see in this post on TechSpot, some titles are quickly pushing past that 16 GB of memory. Don't forget, you'll actually want to save a little bit of headroom for any background Windows tasks or applications you might be running simultaneously, like Discord or something if you're talking to your friends. Fortunately, the SSD and RAM are both upgradable in AORUS 16X, so if you opt for the 16GB model, it's just an easy upgrade down the line. The other limitation is the 8GB of VRAM on the RTX 4070 laptop GPU. And in 2024, if you want to play games on the highest settings or above 1080p, 8GB of video memory isn't enough. The desktop RTX 4060 Ti GPU is a prime example of this, and why so few people have actually gone out and bought that thing. If you're spending that much money, you don't want to run into stutter or have missing textures whilst gaming, especially with this kind of thing as well. £1,400 is a lot of money for a laptop. Now, most of these issues only really apply to AAA games like Ratchet & Clank or Hogwarts Legacy. If you're looking to play games like Counter-Strike 2 or Valorant, these limitations shouldn't really affect you as much in those titles, as they're much more optimized for running on less capable hardware and just less good looking games. As such, with a laptop like this, you can get some very high frame rates on those kind of games. So I suppose if you've bought this laptop, you'll want to play at the native 2560 by 1600 resolution. In that case, you'll be looking at doing so with medium settings in games if you want solid playable frame rates. Now, the 1% lows of all of these titles I tested are all below 60 in these titles, but thanks to the G-Sync panel in this machine, that makes it seem a lot less jarring, as there's no horrible screen tearing. However, you could always just use DLSS balanced or performance instead of quality, like I use for my tests, or another option is enabling frame generation either through NVIDIA and DLSS or through AMD's FSR frame generation. These technologies can help smooth things out a bit more, though you can sometimes experience some small artifacts on screen and increased latency. As I mentioned before though, you should be good with esports titles. Valorant and Counter-Strike 2 both run extremely well on the high preset, and if you want to get those 1% lows above that 165Hz minimum refresh rate, you can always knock the settings down to medium or just knock the resolution down to 1920 by 1200. All of this power though does come at a cost. That cost isn't ridiculous temperatures, thankfully, because during gaming the CPU hovered between about 75 and 85 degrees, which is not terrible for a laptop CPU. My personal one hits like 90 plus in every game I play, and the GPU was actually pretty cool at around 68 to 70 degrees whilst gaming at the native resolution. The true cost for all this power though is noise. The fans inside this thing spin hard and fast, and even just sitting here with a pretty background, the fans will spin up and off and on, even on the lowest power setting, and the fans set to eco mode, this thing will just spin up the fans when it feels like it. I did all of my testing in the performance mode with the fan speed set to power. You could opt for turbo if you want your ears to bleed, but here's a quick noise test of the power mode, and that is probably the mode that I would recommend. Finally, let's talk about battery life, and I think you'll be reasonably surprised here. This thing is equipped with a massive 99.2 watt-hour battery, and I tested using the PC Mark Modern Office test and got shy of 8 hours with 7 hours and 57 minutes. This is of course with the NVIDIA GPU disabled and using the integrated GPU with the brightness turned down. Another cool feature is that the AORUS 16X recharges your battery up to 50% within 30 minutes when the system is powered off. which could definitely come in handy and is probably similar to what your phone is capable of, though this does need to be powered off, and your phone doesn't. So I guess to conclude, should you buy it? If you have your expectations set correctly and know what the RTX 4070 laptop GPU is capable of and that it's nowhere near its desktop equivalent, then I think you'll be pretty happy. If I'm honest, I'd recommend you probably grab the 16GB version and upgrade it yourself to save a little bit of money, as removing the bottom of the device just requires a Torx screwdriver and what is basically just a guitar pick. I don't feel like the i9 version is worth the extra cash for gaming because the i7 already has plenty of cores. You might get a little bit more FPS in some games, but I feel like the i7 is more than adequate, especially when you have to consider how much extra you pay for that i9. It's like £400+ extra. The RTX 4070 laptop GPU will outperform the RTX 4060 equivalent within this frame, but both models still only have 8GB of video memory, which is very underwhelming. And like I mentioned earlier, the 8GB of VRAM could quite easily just decrease performance regardless of how powerful the RTX 4070 or 4060 is. Some games will have textures missing, some games will just straight up perform worse and basically become unplayable once that video memory fills up. So it's something to bear in mind. As a result, if you're looking to play games with ray tracing or high textures, you will want to make the most of upscaling and frame generation technologies. As for the AORUS 16X as a physical machine, I'm pretty happy with its overall build quality. It's a solid, weighty laptop that's built really well and is very effective at keeping hardware cool while gaming. Of course, it does get very loud while doing so, and also kind of loud while doing nothing, so you might want to pick up a decent gaming headset to block out that fan noise. The keyboard though does feel really nice to type on, the trackpad is big, and the I/O is plentiful for most use cases. My only other minor complaint is that the included Gigabyte software is just a little bit dated and could definitely use a better UI overhaul, but I guess it's functional and it does the job. This thing has been a significant upgrade over my 2020 ROG Zephyrus 15 for the last few weeks, and for £1,400, it's not terrible value. It's quite good actually. Though, is it the best value? I'll let you decide. Let me know what you think about the AORUS 16X in the comments section down below. Have you got one yourself, or are you considering one of these machines? If you've enjoyed this video, click that like button, and if my face hasn't offended you, don't forget to get subscribed. If you're interested in checking out the AORUS 16X or any variations I may have mentioned, check the description for my affiliate links, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Cheers.